This class is being recorded. Excellent. Welcome, Randy and Carla and everybody else that's here. So good to see you all this evening. And this is a really important and the topic that pertains to so many people. And so I'm really excited to dive into it tonight. But I will get Dr. Mark to start us off.
Hi there.
From the Bill Nelems Pain and Research Center.
Right, everybody, can you hear me? Everybody's good. So yeah, just welcome everybody again to another Monday night webinar. This one on trauma and pain, a very, very important subject. As we well know, many patients with chronic pain have some form of trauma, whether it be emotional, physical, psychological, and this is often not very well addressed. Especially even in the medical model, we seem to kind of either gloss over it, or we just don't pay as much attention to it as we necessarily should. And in order to treat patients with chronic pain, it's one of those fields that we've sometimes forgotten about, or more recently are only really learning more and more about how important it is to manage trauma properly in the setting of chronic pain. So I'd like to welcome Madeline and thank everybody for joining us. And again, just respecting one another's privacy and confidentiality so that people feel safe and free to ask questions in the chat or express themselves. So look upon it as a group medical visit with the same kind of implied confidentiality. But other than that, I'll let Madeline get on with this important subject. So yeah, thank you, Madeline.
Great. Yeah, thanks. And I just want to say, the medical system has a lot to contend with already. So it's not something easy to address. And it's something easy, probably more easy to identify. But in terms of actual healing, we'll be talking about that towards the end of tonight. I can see that things are going to shift and change within the medical field in this respect, because it just comes into not just pain, but so many other chronic illnesses and conditions, as we'll be finding out through some of the research that's being done. So Thank you.
Okay, sure, you're welcome.
Great. Okay, so trauma and pain. Everybody can hear me okay? You can see me okay if you want to. You don't have to. Turn my video off if you want to. And I'll keep a little half an eye on the chat. Great. If from time to time, because it's a topic that I'm doing on my own tonight. And I thought I would start just by telling you a little bit about my background, because it's always useful to know who you're talking to, even if you've heard me on Monday nights before. But I actually came into this field from the field of trauma. And I've been in the mental health field for over 25 years now, and slowly focused my way into trauma, just because that seemed to be at the root or in the background of so many things. And that's not to say that everybody wanted to go there to the root, and that is totally fine. We all get there at our own pace, in the perfect timing for us. But when I started to see more people who had pain, ongoing pain, chronic pain, they were actually coming to me for treatment of the trauma that was related to the pain. So it might have been a car accident that they were having a lot of post-traumatic stress symptoms from, or it might have been childhood trauma that they felt was connected. This is coming from them. They felt was connected to their fibromyalgia. Or often there were stomach issues, digestive issues, irritable bowel syndrome, all kinds of symptoms that were coming in, people that were coming in with symptoms. And as we treated the trauma over time, it just makes sense. Now we know so much more. This is going, back a few decades. The physical symptoms seem to subside. The pain over time got better. It might have initially got worse, but we were focusing on the trauma, and then it seemed to get better. And since then, so much more research has been done in this area. And when we start talking about the nervous system, it's just going to make so much sense. And you might already know this yourself just from your own, just from your own lived experience. And often when I ask people, I find this so interesting that, perhaps, what do you feel was the reason for your fibromyalgia or your unexplained pain symptoms? Often people will tell me directly themselves that it started from a trauma. Not always, and I don't always say that every pain starts from trauma, but often we already know this inside ourselves. Or on the flip side is that the trauma, the stress, ongoing anxiety, we know this already, makes pain so much worse. So let's dive in. So tonight, what we're going to dive into is a little bit about trauma. What is trauma? Because there might be some things that you might know already, and you might have an idea. And also, what is post-traumatic stress disorder? How is it different? And then this connection between trauma and pain. Throughout tonight's talk, I want you to be aware of yourself. And, we're talking about trauma. And the thing about talking about trauma, and also I find when we talk about the emotion of shame, which we're not really going to talk that much about tonight, it's hard to talk about it without a person, without, whoever you're talking about it with, or yourself, actually feeling it. So that's the thing. So we're going to be taking a lot of safety breaks. And if you can, remember this, what I call safety breaks. And what I mean by that is calming and finding safety in the body as we go along. If you find one of these safety break exercises really helpful, take that one and keep doing it. Keep doing it, because what we know about pain and trauma is that it's all about feeling safe in the body. Once again, when we're in pain, it's really hard to feel safe in your body. And safe might not be the word that you use. It might be something else. It might be just uncomfortable. It might be anxious. But all of those things lead back to safety in the body. And then we're going to talk about what to do next. So so absolutely, those things that happened as a child, often we already know intuitively that they relate to how we feel now. And you're not alone, and that makes so much sense. Your body is doing the thing that it knows how to do best, and that is to keep you safe, to help you to survive above anything else, above anything. Survival trumps everything. Okay, so I want to just say, for tonight's talk, if you haven't already, when if you feel like you get enough from tonight, that's perfect. We had a guest on here, Dr. Mark Grant, who is one of the experts in the world on the trauma-pain connection. And his webinar is also up on the website. I went back and watched it, and there are so many gems in there that I had forgotten. And so with his permission, I borrowed a couple of his slides for tonight. And so I want you to be aware of yourself tonight. And you can ask yourself before we start, how resourced do I feel? How resourced, how supported do I feel tonight? And if the question that comes back for yourself is like, I've had a shaky night, a day, I'm not feeling on top of my game, I really don't feel like I want to take in this information, then that's fine. You go back, you can pause and watch the recording later. There's no pass or fail here. So be aware of yourself, all right? Okay. Safety break. everybody, wherever you are, we're all in this together and we're all safe here. But let's remind our nervous systems by taking 2 or 3 of your own deeper, slower breaths. And just making that transition from whatever was happening in your day up to this point to now being here in this moment. So take a few deeper inhales. With your exhales, let gravity ground you right down to feel your feet and your seat. So sigh it out, everything, jaw, just feel that if you can. Shoulders, right down into this moment. And I do that probably 10 times a day for myself and also with my clients. Just get very wrapped up in what we're talking about, and sometimes we just need to come back to here and now and know that you're safe. Right. Yeah, so I'll just say that again. The name of the video, the webinar that's already up on the website is with Dr. Mark Grant. Okay, so let's be clear that trauma may or may not, I can't say it does not directly cause chronic pain, but it activates the same mechanisms in the body. It shows up in the same way that can make pain worse. So just be aware that there are people who have had trauma that do not develop chronic pain or chronic conditions. And we don't know why, but it doesn't mean that since I had trauma that it's a direct line to chronic pain. There is a lot of variation in there, and there's a lot of different variables that happen, but there, as you'll be finding out, there is a very strong correlation between the two. But it can make people more vulnerable to developing chronic pain and illness. And we know that now. Treating trauma, how many of you know that already that treating trauma can help treat chronic pain? And sometimes I would say in particular instances that it is necessary to treat the trauma if the trauma is activating the pain. So it doesn't have to be one big major traumatic event that happened in your life that often we think of, but it can be what I call the ongoing stuck stress in the nervous system that doesn't get a chance to release itself. So what is trauma? So the most common example that we have, and again, I've attributed this to Mark Grant down here. The most common example is something that we all know is when a soldier has been through a war. And this is where we first started to realize there was something to this after even before this, but mostly after the First World War, where the soldiers were coming back and had all kinds of symptoms, and we didn't know what it was. Or we might think of one major event like an assault or a robbery or something like that. But the people most likely to have it are people who experience domestic trauma, especially as children. And we can't always identify this right away. And we don't always know this. So trauma, there's a few different definitions, and I'll give you a few, is just so we know we have a common field of what we're talking about, is the emotional response to experiencing or witnessing something, an event or a series of events that are both distressing and also causes feelings of helplessness and overwhelm. And so it can be what we call like a big T. So a big T trauma that's very clear, it's very obvious, a single event that might lead directly to post-traumatic stress disorder, or it might be small t. So it might be a series of, like this fellow over here, this child who was bullied at school, you know, ongoing, where you have to keep going to school or going into a place where you don't feel safe in your nervous system. And the key in a situation like that would be, does he have a safe place in his life? Does he have a safe home with empathetic parents to go back to? And that can almost balance out, you know, an unsafe school situation. I'm not saying it completely erases it, but it can balance it out so he knows he does have a safe place in the world. It can be, you know, domestic violence. It can also be a family divorce where there's a lot of fighting or conflict, where the child doesn't feel safe in the home. And overwhelm, meaning that the nervous system has too much, it is full to capacity. So it's the emotional and psychological response that can continue in your nervous system to activate the nervous system, that can linger and cause ongoing distress. And yeah, so the thing is that often after a trauma, we sometimes have to just get back to life, or this boy has to continue going to school. And so we don't get that chance that, say, animals in the wild get, to shake it off, to release it, to release all the stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, because we just keep going. So in this society, unless we actually get to a point where we have to. So it's too much to process, digest, and integrate at the time. And trauma does not happen to weak people, or, you know, people who just can't handle it. That's a complete myth. We all have nervous systems that can handle certain things and can't handle other things, and shouldn't have to, right? But it overwhelms the system. So an easy way to think of it is the input or the experience actually exceeds the capacity of the system, causing an overload. And here's a key point, you guys, that in that moment, there's an inability to respond, to express, or to find safety. Safety might mean a look in, it might mean getting to a safe place where you're away from the threat, or it might mean a look from a parent or a caregiver's eye that says, it's okay, honey, we're all right, we're safe. Those signals of safety. Or having an empathetic person to go back and talk to and to be able to release it. So if we don't have those things, then this energy activation, the stress activation, stays in our bodies. And this is where we see it. It creates a pattern of adaptation. So you might think for a moment of, let's just think of something small, like something that irritated you, or maybe there was a moment where you were driving and you had, you know, kind of a dangerous situation, and or you had a stressful relationship, you know, something that was stressful. We create in ourselves, if we have to keep going, we create a pattern of adaptation. So the adaptation might mean numbing. So we move into a freeze response where we kind of double down, we kind of lock down, and we don't feel the good things and we don't feel the bad things, or we avoid certain types of people or certain places. Adaptation can also be an anger response. So we get really angry about things, or people pleasing, overworking, perfectionism can also be adaptations to certain types of trauma that we've learned. So probably everybody out there right now is saying, I've got trauma, I'm adapting to something, because all of those, yeah. Yeah, and I don't say that lightly. I just say that we all, I don't think and that anybody gets through this life without some type of overload at some point and some kind of adaptation. So right now, if you got your hands up and you're like, I've got all of those, you're not alone. And what we know now, through, there was a film that just came out called The Wisdom of Trauma by Gabor Mate, who some of you might know. And we really know that trauma does not have to be a life sentence. And that's kind of what I'm here to say tonight, that it is treatable. And most of us, all of us, I'm going to venture to say, have it to some degree. When we notice where we get triggered, those are kind of our indications of where healing can begin. All right. So let's talk for a moment about something called adverse childhood experiences. And the other word for this is ACEs. There was a huge study that was done that related childhood experiences to vulnerability in later life to chronic conditions and chronic pain and chronic illness. So there's been a lot of research since then to figure out, why is that? How do we get set up for that? How do we get it set up for chronic pain? So some of the what they call the ACEs, ACE, when they had so many people take this ACEs study and get their score, and then they followed them for a long time, like decades. And they found that experiences in childhood of like physical abuse or verbal abuse, emotional, or a parent being unavailable. So when a child needs validation, needs connection, needs attachment in order to grow and thrive. If a parent was chronically unavailable, emotionally available, that also led to certain experiences that can be traumatic. And I want you to remember, if you're a parent, that it's not possible to be available all the time. It's not possible. Do not put that on yourself, because it is impossible. I'm not available to my kids all the time, but they know as long as there is some kind of strong connection. So I don't want you to beat yourself up if you're a parent, because you can only do so much, right? If there's a lot of family conflict or domestic violence, and again, every child is going to be different. So you might have 4 kids in the same household. One comes out with ongoing trauma and the other 3 don't. You just don't know. Or another type of trauma we don't hear about too much is the parentification, or using a child to meet an unmet need. And where I've seen this a lot is when parents have an unlived life of their own and they are living vicarious through their children. Say they really want their child to be a hockey star, and they put them in hockey and they pay, thousands of dollars, and they really put that pressure on the child to be something, to meet their own need. And that might not necessarily even be what the child wants. And I think subconsciously, that happens anyway. Like we want, the best for our children. But also to meet a need like that, or to meet an emotional need that the parent is not being met elsewhere. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for posting the Trauma Super Conference. I was at it last year, and really, really worthwhile. Yeah. I wonder if that is the one from last year. You can purchase all the talks if you're so inclined. Thank you. So there's 3 different types of early childhood trauma. Again, there's abuse or neglect, or just general household dysfunction. And the best way to think about this is that we have a saying, in psychology that says the body remembers. So even though sometimes we can't remember ourselves, we can remember through our body that certain things make us anxious, or we avoid certain things, or we're not able to speak up because that's not always welcome, not always safe. And for a lot of people, it takes their adult life to learn once again how to speak up and have their needs met. Maybe it's as simple as in the doctor's office or into talking to a person of authority, that we realize like, oh, I just get stuck or I get frozen. I can't say anything. The body remembers through patterns. All right. So how does trauma then affect an adult? Well, we have something that's called post-traumatic stress disorder, and it basically shows up in 3 different areas. And sometimes when I talk to people about this, they don't actually know that what they may have been experiencing might originate in trauma, and it might be able to be cleared up. Sometimes we just take these things as a part of life, that this is just the way life is, and it might not be. So we either feel stressed, tense, agitated in that fight-flight response, or we feel tired, just fatigue and insomnia, or just fatigue and sleeping all the time, or scared, feeling anxious, and with that feeling a lot of thoughts and feelings that feel very intrusive, like just keep going. And if you think about it, this experience of trauma is very similar to the experience of living with pain, isn't it? So the way that this shows up, stressed, tense, I talk about bracing a lot in your body, feeling tired but sometimes can't sleep, feeling worried about the future, what's going to happen to me, and having feelings of anxiety. So the way it shows up, again, in the same part of the brain, and it shows up similarly in the body. So when we're talking about PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is what I work with a lot, we have that increased physiological response, that fight-flight response. And again, this is from Mark Grant. He just had some really, really clear super lists. The insomnia, fatigue, the anxiety. You can see all the different ways it might show up in avoidance of triggers or avoidance of challenging situations. Maybe avoidance of work if there's been a work-related incident. Avoidance of driving. Fear of driving is quite common. And you might say, well, I'm just not going to drive anymore. And maybe that's okay, but then your world has just become a lot smaller, and you might worry still about a time where you have to drive. Say you have to drive someone to the hospital. So even though we think when we're avoiding, we got rid of it, we haven't really gotten rid of it. Emotional dysregulation, feeling moody, irritable. Although I will just go back there 1 second. Sometimes we have gotten rid of it. If we're being traumatized, or if we're in a toxic relationship and we end that relationship, and then we actually have gotten rid of the trigger, the person, but then we still have the trauma to heal. Okay. Because the trauma is in the nervous system. Dissociation, feeling numb, not really feeling a whole lot, having difficulty even knowing what you feel, feeling depression, guilt, shame, and and just kind of feeling bad about yourself. And again, this also can really look like chronic pain, right? Pain can also just make us feel really bad about ourselves. So how common is PTSD? Well, it is pretty common. Like 5 to 10% of the general population is quite a few people. That's the general population. But 20 to 50% of people with chronic pain also have PTSD. That's why this webinar is pretty important. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you have PTSD, but you might be thinking, I've got a few of those things, and I'm wondering if it's making my pain worse. So you can see almost up to half of people with chronic pain have some element of, or have a diagnosis, I think this was through this research, of PTSD. Okay, so just good information. All right, so let's just do that mini practice again. And of taking of 2 or 3 deeper breaths. So we're kind of pendulating between activating, listening, learning, maybe thinking or feeling, and then breathing to keep us grounded. And it's going to be this constant seesaw, this constant balance of our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system right here in real time. So just take 2 or 3 of those deeper, slower breaths. Check in with yourself. Just notice yourself along the way. And just see if you are holding any muscle tension, and with your exhale, let go of any muscle tension. Notice if your hands or feet are clenched, or your shoulders. Coming right back down now, grounding yourself. Maybe having a drink of water is always good. The nervous system loves water. Okay. So here's kind of, I've tried to make it fairly simple. We'll talk about the stress pain cycle. So when you are under stress, so if you wake up in the morning and you've got a really busy day ahead of you, and there's a few things that you just rather not do. It doesn't look like it's going to be it looks like it's busy and not a great day. The chemical cortisol gets released. So the cortisol gets us going, gets us up, gets us activated. And when we have something happen, like say if we get into an argument or into a conflict, we're going to have cortisol released into our body. And that when that cortisol gets released, it actually helps us. It actually helps our immune system. And for a period of time, it actually decreases pain. And that might be when you have to move yourself. So I once had a client who was in a car accident, and she hit her head, and she kind of lost consciousness. And when she woke up, she realized where she was in her car. Her fight or flight was instantly activated to get her out of the car because she was so worried about the car blowing up or something like that. So even though she had a broken ankle, she didn't feel any pain, because in that moment that cortisol was pumping and she needed to get to where she needed to get. So in an instant like that, where there is acute stress, acute pain, we get this release of cortisol that's really helpful. When stress is prolonged, so if it's ongoing, and maybe if it's a stressful, toxic workplace or family situation, this increased cortisol hormone starts to take a toll on your body. Our bodies are not designed to cope with ongoing stress. They kind of need a stress and release, and a stress and a release. So cortisol over time can affect many, many systems of our body, including our immune system. And we know this. A great book, When the Body Says No, is about when bodies finally say, no more, I can't do this anymore. So I'm going to give you chronic fatigue. I'm going to give you chronic pain so that you actually have to stop because I can't do this anymore. That's the body speaking. And So, and we'll get into that cycle in a second. So is there a relationship? What is the relationship between chronic pain and PTSD? So this is just some other studies that showed that 15 up to 50% of people with chronic pain also have PTSD. And also 20 to 30% of PTSD report ongoing pain. So upwards of 90% of women with fibromyalgia syndrome, that's a lot, report some kind of trauma in either their childhood or adulthood. Now, I want to be careful about that though, too, because again, as I said, so many people have backgrounds of trauma that don't develop fibromyalgia. So it's a useful piece of information. It doesn't 100% work that way. And 60% of people with arthritis also report a trauma history. And upwards of 76% of people with chronic lower back pain report having at least one trauma in their past. Now, I want you to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because most people can report one trauma in their past, but still it can be significant. And if anybody's really likes the research part of things, there's a study that just came out. It's called the Boulder Back Pain Study. And they are reporting now really successful results from having people with chronic back pain express their emotions in particular ways over, I think it was a 4-week period. And the decrease in lower back pain was phenomenal, like hasn't been seen before in the chronic pain world. So really interesting stuff. So why do they go together? So many traumatic events actually cause physical pain, right? Car accidents, assaults, injuries, like they actually do cause pain, and even the memory of them. So our brain can also, well, we know if you've been in classes already that all pain is processed in the brain. So we could even imagine right now, or if you're watching a movie, if you're like me and you're watching a movie and there's someone, getting hurt, I actually feel it in my body. So even the memory of a traumatic event can cause pain, because our brain learns that way. And symptoms of unresolved trauma or post-traumatic stress can cause pain in the body or make pain worse. And you know what it's like with like constant muscle tension, sleep disturbance, hypervigilance, being always on alert. That is going to keep your nervous system on high alert in the danger zone, right, of chronic pain. And when our bodies, if you've heard about central sensitization, it tend to feel this pain more acutely, more openly. So again, for someone with fibromyalgia, you're going to have central sensitization. You're going to feel pain, feel sensations, even more than someone else. Okay. So if our gates are open to more stimuli, if we're already kind of sensitive to it, we are going to be open to more pain. And we pick up on anxiety and stress, and anxiety and stress increase pain if we're already kind of set up for it. But not only that sometimes we have been so trained to be hypervigilant of our environments, of other people, particularly if you have a background of trauma or some family dysfunction. So we're so aware of other people and their needs that we haven't been taught to listen to ourselves, or we've actually been taught not to listen to ourselves. And that is not only for people who have a history of trauma. I would say that is true for most people in the world, that we're not really taught how to listen to ourselves. And are we, like, to really say, what do I need? What do I feel? What do I need? It seems like often like a new thing. And what this can result in over time is increased fatigue, increased stress, maybe a toxic workplace that then can lead to burnout. And often, when I talk to people who have burned out, they'll often say, I didn't really see it coming. Or they get chronic fatigue, and then they, in retrospect, when their body has said no, they look back and say, oh yeah, I guess this has been happening for years. But I didn't see it coming. And I remember when I worked with a very, very high achieving person once, who was in the medical field, and she, one morning, she had a crazy schedule. She was working all nights, at a hospital and on call, and very little sleep. And this is just what they did. This is just part of what they had to do, until one day she couldn't get out of bed. She simply could not get out of bed. And even then, she didn't know why. So this is crazy. Why can't I get out of bed? She had been running her body at full tilt for way too long, and then suffered with chronic fatigue and massive pain after that. Anyway, all of these things contribute to the muscle tension over time and aggravate pain. Okay. Another little thing that I wanted to bring in here too, again, trauma is not always obvious. We can feel like we're always doing something wrong, like it's my fault, it's my responsibility. Or if someone bumps into you at the mall and you're the one that says, oh, sorry, even though it was clearly not your fault. If you're the one that always feels like, I'm at fault, that can also be a symptom of, a child who was, who had no other way of understanding their world other than this: whatever's happening in my house is my fault. It must be something to do with me. Yeah, because children don't have a way. Their brains are not developed enough to know that those adults over there who are fighting, that's nothing to do with you. The brain is not developed enough. They can only see themselves. It must have something to do with me. This stress must have something to do with me. And that carries on with us. So we end up over pleasing and over keeping the peace for other people, because it feels so stressful to have conflict. And we feel like it's our duty to look after everybody else. So that can also be a symptom of unresolved trauma. It's really common, really common. All right, let's do a little mini practice. Let's just find our feet. Take those few deep breaths and ground yourself right into your feet again, here and now. The other thing that we can do is shake out your hands and your feet. And I'll tell you why this is really helpful in a few minutes, just to shake your body around a little bit. And this is why. Why don't animals get PTSD? Seems like a silly question, but maybe it's because they don't have brains that are developed enough to remember, or we've seen the videos of animals getting chased by predators, getting chased by lions and tigers and cheetahs. And that's a life-threatening situation. That's a real life-threatening situation. So what happens, and if you're interested in this part of it, the book by Peter Levine, Waking the Tiger, is that, for example, the lion will chase the gazelle and chase and chase and chase, and the gazelle is flight, full-on flight. The gazelle now knows that the lion's catching up to them, there's no point in fighting. There's no point. This is a helpless situation. So they fall down on the ground, then they become immobilized. It's kind of like playing dead, pretend dead. And they hope that the lion's going to lose interest and leave. If they are lucky enough that the predator actually leaves, what happens after that is the really interesting part. They get themselves back up, they shake, and they shiver, and they vibrate, and all of that adrenaline and cortisol gets released from their body, and they return to normal state, and they walk away. Done. The problem with our society is that we don't have that shaking state. We don't have those ways of releasing. Well, we do, but we don't know this. And we've confined ourselves physically to sit in chairs and do things certain ways. And if somebody's shaking and doing all kinds of crazy stuff out there, somebody might call the cops. But you know what I mean? We don't have our ways of being able to shake the stuff off. And when you're a child and you're activated like that, there's no way that you can understand this and know what to do. And or if you have ongoing stress in your life right now, even more important to be doing this, to be shaking, be moving. Some of the a lot of cultures have had dancing rituals where a lot of the tribal communities, when they're at war or they have to go and hunt for their food, they're at war with another tribe, they have dancing rituals. So a really good one is just the shaking, and the loosening up the muscles, and also the sweeping. And if any of you have seen me before, this is called havening. I've taught this in a few classes. Sweeping out, sweeping down your legs, down your arms. And it's almost like sweeping those chemicals out of your body. And the self-touch also gives us less cortisol and adrenaline and more chemicals called oxytocin and serotonin, which are the feel-good chemicals. So those are just some little things. Okay, but so we can get stuck with a fire alarm, a smoke alarm that keeps on going off, right? Does that sound familiar to anybody, having a smoke alarm in your body that keeps you like agitated and on alert and feeling, in danger a lot of the time, or somebody touches you on the shoulder and you jump, or you just can't settle down, feel uneasy. And this is when we have the sympathetic nervous system, SNS, activated. There's an event. In a in a healthy nervous system, the parasympathetic, the green comes in right about here. And the green then calms us back down to normal, calms us back down. If that doesn't happen and the green can be shaking, yes, someone says singing is so awesome. That vibration that you feel in your throat, oh, get into your car, crank up the tunes and sing away. Or having an empathetic person to talk to can bring us back down to a healthy state. If not, we keep on being agitated in fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze is when we really get stuck with adrenaline, cortisol, muscle tension, shallow breath, digestion. We can't digest when our body thinks that we're under threat. A negative racing mind, fear, startle response, anxiety. Once again, I'm just kind of showing you here, these symptoms sound very much to me like what it's like to be in a pain response. So a pain and a trauma response are very, very similar. show up in the same way. One can make the other one worse. And then shut down. If we just shut down. Another one, exhaustion. Having memories. And that's kind of a lot of the symptoms in a nutshell. Okay, so there we go again with the ACEs study that I talked about earlier. And there's a lot of facts online that you can look up about it to see. But number one on this summary, that ACEs can lead to chronic pain and migraines. All right, just another mini practice as we go along. If you feel like you're really focusing hard on this, just join me. Sing if you like as you roll your shoulders one way, another. And again, that's just very small, simple ways of changing our nervous system. Again, the symptoms of trauma that affect pain at that intersection that I talked about is an overly active nervous system, sleep disturbance, emotional numbing and avoidance, and depression and anxiety. So we're going to start getting into some of the ways that we can rebalance this. But I can't get through a talk on trauma without talking about the good old vagus nerve. And it's when you get into the theory of the vagus nerve, it's really complicated. So I'm going to keep it super simple. We have the huge nerve that goes from the base of our cranial right down into our gut and all of our organs. And the cool thing about this is, well, we think that we send signals from our brain down into our body, but it turns out through the vagus nerve that 80% of the signals get sent from our body up to our brain. So what does this mean for us? If we can relax and feel safer through our body, we're going to give the signal to our brain, whether it's through, because, from trauma or pain, the brain's telling us we're unsafe. We can send the signal up through the vagus nerve to actually ask the brain to turn down the volume on the trauma, turn down the volume on the pain. So it's this two-way street. And the vagus nerve is our key to the parasympathetic rest and digest branch of the nervous system that's going to help to rebalance out our fight, flight, freeze. So the vagus nerve is what we need to know here. So in what they call polyvagal theory about the vagus nerve, there's 3 states, and this is going to be important to know so that you know what you need. Basically, there's a no stress state, a stress state, and a shutdown state. Just very, simply 3 states that we might find ourselves in. So from fight, we want to move from fight, flight, and whether that's through trauma or through pain, we want to move from fight, flight to polyvagal. Don't worry about the name polyvagal right now. So acute stress makes us anxious, alert, the nervous system's on fight, flight. We want to get from there to calm and connected. Or with chronic stress, when we've gone into frozen or numb, we want to get from here to calm and connected, right? Oh, I put in a lot of practices, didn't I? Let's do this one. The one way that we can do that, we can do it right now, is to actually move your eyes up and around your room right now. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to tell yourself, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. Just move your eyes, and your nervous system now knows that you're in a safe place because you can see, you're looking around, even behind you, that you're okay. So that is a good example of sending a message from your body up to your brain without having to say anything. So we've got a few now. We've got feel your feet in your seat, deep breathing, shaking, sweeping, orientating to your environment. These are all activating our vagus nerve that is taking us from fight, flight, or freeze to calm and connected. Okay, wait, I didn't want to get there yet. Okay, I just want to go back here for a second. There was more that I wanted to say right here because I can see we're come to the end here. Okay, so the important part of this is you need to know what state you are in. If your nervous system feels anxious, alert, agitated, because of, for whatever reason, we don't even really need to figure that out, then you're going to have to do something very different to come to calm and connected than if you were frozen or numb. Okay. So often we just say, calm, be calm, breathe deeply, relax, rest. Rest is not always the answer. And rest is sometimes simply not the answer for frozen or numb, for the freeze response. So if you are in an anxious, alert state, what do you suppose the best thing for you would be to do? Really anxious, agitated, antsy, can't settle down. Any ideas about what works for you when you're in that state? Yeah. Deep breathing, going for a walk, meditation, painting, movement. Yeah, move around and breathing. Oh, great ideas. Grounding, classical music. Go outside with Pooch. Creativity, yes. Awesome ideas. Oh, great. Wow, you guys are right on it. Go swimming. Yeah. So when you're already activated, you're going to know what's best for you. And it can be at that point sometimes hard just to calm yourself down, but you're going to want to do all those things that you said to take the edge off, they would say, to get calm, more connected, maybe with nature. Yeah, close your eyes and take deep breaths. Beautiful. I love all meditation, painting, creativity. And when I say calm and connected, I don't always mean connected to other people. Sometimes it means connecting with yourself, with your own creativity, with nature, with your dogs, but connecting so that you don't feel as fragmented or disconnected, I guess. Yeah. So when you're in that acute stress stage. Now, if you are in the frozen or numb stage, in other words, you've gone into shutdown, it might look very different. So when we start to activate ourselves out of the freeze, out of being stuck, sometimes, I'll just tell you this, sometimes when we start to activate ourselves, we also activate our nervous system. Sometimes our pain can start to get worse before it gets better. And we might say, oh, this isn't working. I'm going to go back and shut myself down again because I don't want to feel more pain. But often the way that we become unstuck or the way that we unfreeze is the same way that we went in. And what I mean by that is that if we have been very stressed, even, trauma, anger, fear, and we went into shutdown, as we start to get activated, sometimes all of those emotions now start to release. So this is a really important thing to know, because, for example, going for therapy and all these emotions start coming out, and you're like, "Oh, where did all this is not, I'm going to get them back in, freeze, don't want to feel this." But when they're actually coming out, as long as the nervous system is fairly safe and resourced, that is healing. That is healing. And that is what we are finding now is really helpful for chronic pain within a safe environment, within a safe structure. So if you're frozen and numb, it might look very different. It might mean becoming more active. It might mean you might feel very, very stressed, very agitated, and feel like I just want to go to bed. But it might be the best thing to actually do something that's more activating to help you actually break out of the freeze. I hope that's making sense. So that's why I wanted to bring this up. When it comes to the vagus nerve, it can very much help us in two different ways. And only you can know what is going to get you over to calm and connected. And all those ways that people mentioned are all awesome. Okay. So trauma and the nervous system, only you can regulate your own nervous system. That being said, when you're connected with another person, and we're finding out even on Zoom, just being connected with other humans, eye contact, using voice, hearing, that is also very regulating, as long as it feels safe, obviously. We regulate slowly and carefully over time. There's no one-shot deal here. And that goes for trauma and chronic pain. And one of the, somebody I really like, Irene Lyon, she has a lot of videos on YouTube. What I learned from her was really we have to start at ground level of really getting to know your body in present time, what my triggers feel like, what my anxiety feels like, and what I need. And even getting more basic than that, what are my body needs, my body functions? Is it to go to the bathroom? Do I need to listen to that? Do I need to take a glass of water? Do I need to get outside for some fresh air? So things that are even as basic as that start to regulate our nervous system. We've been so used to avoiding ourselves. We've been trained. We sit in school and have certain bathroom breaks at certain times, and so it's helpful. It's helpful to get really in touch with what you need, even at a very basic biological level. Mind-body therapies, something called somatic psychotherapy. If you're looking for therapy, soma meaning the body. So that would involve that vagus nerve that I talked about and working with the body, not just the mind. I find that changing the mindset when it comes to trauma is very limited. It's really hard to just talk yourself out of a trigger, isn't it? When your body is overwhelmed, when your nervous system is completely dysregulated, try talking yourself out of that. And if you've been there and you go to the same adaptation or the same numbing or the same addictions all the time, you're not alone. Don't try to change your mindset, or I shouldn't say don't try. I'm not saying it's not helpful, But we've often been told, just, change your mindset or think positive or, do something different. Well, it's not that easy when it comes to a trauma response, because our trauma responses have been about survival, and no mindset is going to talk you out of survival. And that's why our species has survived. So don't beat yourself up if you revert to the same old, same old. But there is a way of moving through it. Grounding, setting clear boundaries. Be here next week. It's going to be an important talk. I was going to tell you about someone that I'm, calling Julia, and she was a client that had ages ago, fibromyalgia and irritable bowel syndrome, and just sometimes it's really helpful to just hear examples of we traced it back. Julia was brought up in a very disruptive household. There was a lot of conflict. There was a lot of fighting. She had an alcoholic parent, so it was never stable. She was the oldest of 3 children, and I have her permission, by the way. I never tell stories, and this is not her real name. And so it was her responsibility to look after her 2 younger siblings from a very, very young age. And so she always had a sense that everything that happened around her was her responsibility. And it was her duty to keep other people safe. And remember, the body keeps the score. That was the pattern that she had, which led her into all kinds of, unhealthy relationships where she caretook for her partners who were, not, they were abusive, not nice to her, very, again, replicating her childhood in her relationships. And the body eventually says no. The body keeps the score. She ended up coming in for fibromyalgia and irritable bowel. Well, when you're under that much stress for so many years, you can bet that your bowel is going to be irritable, because your digestive system shuts down in trauma, and it doesn't have the resources to digest. And so as she was able to pay more attention to what she needed in her body, whether it was rest, whether it was a walk, good food, what felt good to her, that was a long process. She started to slowly get more energy, and her symptoms slowly started to just release a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. And, sometimes it is like you flip a switch. So she always, not flip a switch for the better, but like it was like a switch had been flipped at a certain point. So I don't think she will ever, she will always have to be careful. She will always have to watch her sleep, her nutrition, her self-care, her relationships, all of those things, in order to keep a lid on her symptoms. That's not true for everybody. Some people do actually clear up their symptoms. But my feeling is, and I could be totally wrong in this, my feeling is that for most of us who have already been sensitized in our nervous systems, or we're sensitive people, we're empaths, that we always will have to keep an eye on our own self-care, and still, be at risk for flare-ups. Okay, so we're getting to the end here. Take a few deep breaths. I'll leave you with some treatment and some resources. Again, nervous system regulation. Irene Lyon online is a good place to start. Self-care, boundaries are essential. And I just want to say that if you're like, I just can't say no, I'm not going to be able to do that one. Stay curious about that. that could be a trauma response, not being able to say no. And that can be a real doorway towards your healing. It can be a real doorway as I learn how to set one loving, kind boundary around myself. A whole lot of things can happen after that. Getting therapy for trauma and treatment for chronic pain. So both. It's ideal. Is ideal. Yeah. Sorry that this is cut off a little bit on this side. Some books that I really liked: When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk. The Trauma Spectrum, I don't recommend that one anymore. Sorry, I don't know how that, it's long and it's lengthy and you don't need to. What I would like to put instead of that one is Healing Trauma by Peter Levine. And really anything by Peter Levine is good. He is developer of something called somatic experiencing. If you're curious about complex PTSD, and that's childhood ongoing trauma, Pete Walker has a great book. He's a survivor of complex PTSD, and it's so well written for people who have or are curious if they have complex PTSD. And something I added on there was the Empath Survival Guide. If you are a very sensitive soul who picks up on their environment, who picks up on what other people are feeling or thinking, very open nervous system, very vulnerable to chronic pain and anxiety and trauma, I really love the Empath Survival Guide by Dr. Judith Orlov. So just coming to the end here. So reclaiming ourselves means reclaiming the stories of us, you know, reclaiming parts of us, of maybe our bodies, our minds, our spirit, parts that when we've experienced trauma or pain, those parts tend to get fragmented and sort of put to the side or disowned. And healing can mean including all of those parts that have been fragmented by trauma and pain. And often they are the same parts, and they may have been cut off at a very, very young age. And I really encourage you, if this talk is resonating with you, to just start reading about it. And maybe even finding, you know, one or two practices that help you to find safety in your body. That's no small thing, because every time you move to safety, that grows in your brain. And when that starts growing, you're actually training your brain away from pain and training your nervous system towards safety. I guess that's, yeah. So the last book was Healing Trauma by Peter Levine. I think a few people asked that. Yeah, Healing Trauma, Peter Levine. And yeah, he has some really, really good books. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just curious if there's any questions that have come up. If you're wondering why I'm talking funny, it's because I had gum surgery on Friday, if that was a question. So I hope that you were able to see, you know, that trauma has a significant impact and overlap, losing my words, with pain. And it's really, really worth looking after yourself Of course, it's really worth paying attention to yourself. It's not selfish, it's necessary. It's selfish. I heard someone say the other day, it's actually selfish not to look after yourself. And I thought, yeah, I think that's probably right. And it's worth pursuing ways of finding safety through your environment, through your breath, through your body, through your relationships, and noticing the things that make you feel unsafe in your nervous system. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, I just want everybody to, this is going to be probably one of the most important things that you do tonight. We're just going to spend a few minutes right now finding safety. So wherever you are, find your feet, find your seat, and you might even bring your hands to either hold yourself or your hands to your belly. Especially if you have any gut issues going on, bring your hands to your belly and almost touching your belly or holding yourself as you would a baby. We know that a mother's touch is what is essential for a baby to live. And it's no different for us. Taking 2 or 3 deeper breaths, expanding your rib cage, side to side, front to back, relaxing your shoulders. Maybe even wiggling a little bit. Get 10% more comfortable right now. If you can, there's no orders here. If you can, in your body, deep breath in, let it go with a sigh. Know right now, if you're here, even if your body, your mind's telling you something different, you're safe. You're safe. Breathing deeply. Another way of triggering your vagus nerve is just to bring some gentle touch to your face, particularly around your eyes. And the vagus nerve connects right in with your ears and your throat. And for the person that mentioned singing, if you are not a singer, another way that you can help your body, help your nervous system is just to hum on your exhale. And you might do that for 5 minutes in the morning and just see what a difference it makes to have that vibration come through your throat where you might have felt tight before. And smile. Yes. So we can end on that. Thank you, Marlene. Just take the corners of your mouth and just turn them up a little bit. And we know that when we activate those muscles, believe it or not, we send a chemical reaction or a message through our body that we're okay. And that doesn't mean smile in the face of fear, but when we smile, even just for ourselves, our body knows that if this organism is smiling, they're probably not being chased by a grizzly bear. That's why laughter yoga has become so popular. Okay, everyone. Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. And the recording will be up on the website. I look forward to seeing you next week. We're really going to dive into boundaries and how to set them safely in a way that we're going to do some kind of cool things. So hope to see you again next week. Have a great rest of your night, and breathe deeply, relax your muscles, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.